Look, y'all already know me. I can't go anywhere without picking up a new piece of art, a little trinket, a poster, something for the crib. That's why the other art fair, that's a dangerous place for me. It's 4 days of independent artists, thousands of original artwork starting at around $100. Even if you're not trying to buy something, you can meet the artists, attend workshops and interactive installations, or, hang around for the mini golf, the DJ sets, and the fully stocked bar. Add the other art fair to your calendar. It's October 30th through November 2nd at Artifact Events in Ravenswood, and tickets start at just $20. Book your tickets online at theotherartfair.com. Fasten your seatbelts for an all areas access conversation spanning a decade inside Formula One with none other than former Haas F1 team principal Gunther Steiner. Unfiltered Live is an event no Formula One fan, hell, no racing fan should miss. The star of Netflix's smash hit docuseries Drive to Survive will take you on a wild ride through his career in motorsports and his decade of working on the Haas team. And it's for one night only. November 15th, Unfiltered Live at the Cadillac Palace Theater. Tickets at BroadwayInChicago.com. Today on CityCast Chicago, over 100,000 marched downtown over the weekend. We got creative ways to raise revenue in Chicago, and we got your thoughts on the spookiest thing in the city. It's Tuesday, October 21st. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I'm joined by executive producer Simone Alisea. Morning, my friend. How you feeling?
I'm all right, Jacoby. How are you?
I am doing very well. I want to give a huge thank you to every single person who stopped by the Ramova Theater on Saturday morning and afternoon to say hi to us. My hope is that there are some new CityCast Chicago listeners here today with us. Welcome. We appreciate you. We gave you the whole spiel at the table. Shout out to the few neighbors who stopped by to meet us and say hi. It was a good morning, Simone, but obviously in the background of that event, we were very aware that just a few miles away from Bridgeport, there were, some estimate between 100 and upwards of 250,000 people who gathered in and around Chicago Saturday morning.
Yeah, the No Kings protest that took place here and across the country, huge crowds. I remember us sitting there at the Ramova and, during a lull, and we're like getting on our phones and scrolling, and you see those first pictures of that massive crowd in Grant Park. And I mean, yeah, it was huge. Definitely larger than the last one in June, organizers said. The estimate there was about 75K. And, here potentially as many as 250,000, but over 100,000, it seems like is the consensus. Crowd estimation is always a kind of a tough game. And yeah, I mean, I saw tons of pictures, and it was a real variety of folks who were out there, right? You had folks who have been out protesting, and then some other folks who've come through, and you've got costumes and signs, and the mayor spoke, the governor spoke, everybody spoke, big old rally, and it was just big. I don't know how else to describe it. It was just big.
Mm-hmm. At one point while we were sitting there, and, I had threw out some line like, protests where the mayor and the governor and the politicians are on some of the front line. I got a lot of skepticism. And our newsletter editor, Emmy Mack, said something to the point of like, everyone needs somewhere to sort of start. And this was a very multi-generational protest where you had young kids out there with their parents and their grandparents. I was scrolling on Instagram a little bit later, and an organizer I follow and a writer, Ricardo Gamboa, whose new play, No Trailer, just premiered over the weekend. He was sharing some of that skepticism that I had, that like, okay, this is sort of a protest that is sort of sanctioned and organized by politicians. But he ended that sentiment was something that has really stuck with me. He was like, I think rather than simply taking No Kings as just a containment strategy by those in power, we should take inventory of the hundreds of thousands of people who showed up. While many of them, as their signs will say, just want to get back to brunch, Many others are trying to get involved and throwing themselves into the only outlet they see available. More than ever, we need to proliferate radical discourse to not allow the potential for uprise sediment into a status quo political imagination. And, I constantly try and check myself, but it's a reminder that everyone's entry point into pushing back is very different and everyone's vantage point is very different. And so there is something very productive and a very strong potential in moments like this that, I hope gets realized.
I agree with you, Jacoby. And I think, because we talk a lot on the show about sort of direct actions that occur, whether that is something like working in mutual aid, working in Migra Watch, Ice Watch, right, doing some kind of rapid response on the ground, or that is more, right, the protests we see at Broadview are more sort of like true civil disobedience, right? When you have people linking arms and preventing a vehicle from moving, like, yes, that's a form of nonviolent protest, but it is still civil disobedience, right? You are preventing an actual action from taking place. But one thing I also think about is our conversation with Ed Yanka from the ACLU, who kind of talked about, when we're talking about like the legal strategy of the lawsuits that are challenging actions by the Trump administration and the federal government, in addition to attempting to change things on the ground, getting a restraining order to stop the National Guard from coming in or trying to stop ICE from using tear gas in neighborhoods, right? Yes, there's sort of a physical thing, but it's also a messaging thing. This federal government has proven that they are trying to enact a propaganda machine, right? Mm-hmm. Think about the messages they wanted airports to play of Kristi Noem, Homeland Security Secretary, blaming Democrats for the government shutdown leading to delays at airports, right? Which O'Hare and Midway have opted not to play. But right, there's a reason that they have Truth Social, right? Their own social media platform. There is an attempt, in addition to these actual actions we're seeing on the ground, they're also trying to get their message out. And so the messaging of 100,000 people up to 250,000 people all gathered together in one place, that's also a message and a powerful one, I think. And that's worth something, right? Getting the people talking about this and kind of seeing the reality of the situation, like that is also kind of part of what a demonstration like the No Kings demonstration does.
And it's clear how much the opposition to the protests has sort of organized in the Trump camp to sort of share talking points. They were already calling it a hate America rally. They were already saying, this goes against our desire to make sure young people come up loving America, which that in itself, I think is anti-American, right? And so you saw over the weekend as Trump was putting out AI videos of essentially shitting on protesters.
Literally, you mean this in a literal sense?
Yeah,
yes.
In a literal sense. He put out a video flying a plane, dumping, pulling a, what's the band again that dumped in a river?
Dave Matthews Band.
Yeah, pulling the Dave Matthews Band on protesters, which, you see his camp in response to that. It's always, he's joking. It's joking. It's in jest. But again, very real, like real people's lives are at stake, have been forever changed in, just the months of these actions. And so seeing all of the footage and then like the next day going to see my mom who, keeps up with the news, but was not aware that this thing was happening. And for her, it like, that moment on Saturday sort of was yet another thing that sort of broke through and her seeing just how much, sort of people are pushing back because a lot of her message is like, what are we to do? What can we do? Like, how much more can we do? And I think in some ways Saturday was her answer. And so my hope is that type of momentum is pushed beyond just people kind of gathering. The mayor himself, suggested things like general strikes. Even as we watch people continue to mobilize on the ground over the weekend, every single day out in Broadview, the rapid response networks that are vigilantly moving through neighborhoods in Chicago trying to protect folks, we're also waiting as this process moves through the federal courts. As you pointed out, at the time of recording this, today is a big deadline for one of those cases, particularly Trump's desire to deploy the National Guard in Chicago and broader Illinois.
Yeah, so we've discussed how the court has put a temporary restraining order on the deployment of National Guard here in Chicago. That was initially U.S. District Court Judge April Perry. That was then affirmed by an appeals panel here in Illinois. And now, late on Friday, the Trump administration has now appealed that to the Supreme Court, is asking the Supreme Court to overturn that. And Monday is the deadline for the city and state to respond to that appeal. Unclear when we might see any kind of decision on that. Historically, the Supreme Court, even on an emergency injunction, works relatively slowly, but that has not necessarily been the case during this administration and during Trump's second term. So I will be curious to see, basically what Judge Perry said and what the appeals court affirmed is that nothing that is happening in Chicago constitutes any kind of rebellion that would necessitate the National Guard. And in fact, the appeals court sort of went farther to say, well, you say you need the National Guard to help protect these immigration agents, but you've touted, 1,000 arrests or whatever, right? You're touting that this is a successful campaign. So how can you need help protecting this campaign that you, by your own admission, you're saying is a successful operation? On the other side, as we're speaking right now, there is literally a hearing happening in Chicago at the federal courthouse. A different judge, U.S. District Judge Sarah Ellis, is questioning ICE and Border Patrol leadership over essentially the other tactics they're using here, particularly around tear gas. Late last week had ordered them to begin wearing mandatory body cams and to put those on. She had issued a ruling previously that sort of banned them from using tear gas, chemical weapons, and other aggressive crowd control tactics against peaceful protesters and against journalists after several groups, including news organizations around Chicago, brought a lawsuit. Basically immediately after that, there was tear gas in Albany Park. There was tear gas on the east side. Immediately, there were incidents where it appeared that order may have been violated. I've been following with all this federal court stuff. I've been following Jason Meisner of the Chicago Tribune and John Seidel of the Sun-Times. They are both federal court reporters they've been doing this stuff for a long time, and they're very good. We're also seeing the city and now the county create these ICE-free zones, right? You cannot use city or county property. ICE cannot use those properties to do any kind of staging or anything like that. And one thing that came down last week was from the Cook County courts, basically saying that ICE cannot do immigration enforcement at the courthouses because this has been an issue. People coming for hearings or coming for, any kind of proceedings that they have to go through, and then ICE is there, Border Patrol is there, and they're getting picked up by ICE, right? And this creates a chilling effect. But it's interesting because I saw after that announcement came out, that order came out, I saw some memes on social media that were like, oh, Cook County sheriffs can arrest ICE now. And I was like, that doesn't seem correct. I don't think that's right. So I reached out to the chief judge's office and I reached out to Cook County sheriffs. And they told me that essentially the way they said that the office of the chief judge provided the sheriff's office the following direction regarding enforcement of this order. So there's going to be signs up at the courthouses. Sheriff's deputies will, notify anybody who is conducting immigration enforcement of what is supposed to happen. Otherwise, deputies will observe, document, and report any immigration enforcement activities to the presiding judge of the courthouse at which the activities occurred. So if you have seen that meme, that is not correct. That is not correct that deputies will be arresting immigration agents. Again, that is not something we are going to see, I suspect, for lots of reasons. Again, I don't think it's nothing, right? In a normal time when a fellow law enforcement officer tells you not to do something, historically, there is a sort of assumed respect between those agencies. I don't know that that will always be the case here, given what we have seen from federal agents who, again, particularly when in the case of demonstrations and tear gas, like there have been repeated instances where CPD officers are getting caught up in that, right? Where they're the ones who are also being gassed along with everybody else. But that is what the sheriff's department has been directed to do.
We know that homelessness is a problem in Chicago and across the country, but for unhoused women and femmes, those dangers only multiply. There are proven solutions to ending chronic homelessness: permanent housing paired with supportive services. Deborah's Place is celebrating 40 years as Chicago's largest provider of permanent supportive housing for women. On Saturday, November 1st, Deborah's Place will kick off Homelessness Awareness Month with a 1.5-mile community walk. You can walk from East Garfield Park to West Humboldt Park alongside staff, supporters, and residents of Deborah's Place. Join to raise awareness for compassionate, effective solutions to homelessness. Learn more, register, or donate at deborahsplace.org. Starting to feel that draft come through your windows? Well, it's only October, so, I can imagine it's probably going to get a little bit worse as it gets breezier and colder. So get ahead before your heating bill starts to feel the blow and install top quality, affordable windows from Window Nation. Or reach out to your landlord and put them on it. You see, with a lifetime warranty and one-day installation, you can relax knowing Window Nation has you covered. Make no payments for 2 years. That's no monthly payment, no down payments, and no interest until 2027. That's a pretty solid deal, you ask me, with all this holiday spending that's coming up. Get started on your free estimate before Halloween to save big. Schedule a fast free estimate now with the pros at Window Nation. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com. Simone, last week, the mayor gave his $16.6 billion budget proposal. We broke that down yesterday with WTTW's Heather Sharon. As we kind of talked through the conversation, it was clear the mayor is trying to find some interesting taxes to raise money in the city, trying to avoid a property tax. But the long and short of it is you either cut spending or you find new money, right? Typically, that's property taxes, fines and fees. But Chicago Magazine dropped an article recently with some of their potential creative strategies for raising revenue in the city. Let's talk through a few of those.
We have talked about some of these a little bit. I think this is a bit tongue in cheek, right? They're calling it budget beaters. So one that we have talked about that our listeners absolutely will not agree with, I know because I saw the emails after we talked about it the last time, was creating smoking cars on the L. So Chicago Magazine says, charge smokers double fare for a dedicated car. I also think, it would theoretically, it could help you with enforcement. You're not forcing people off the train. You're just forcing them into a different car. But I have a feeling folks are not that interested in going back to, the 50s and 60s or whatever, where there was always a...
No. And I also imagine a good amount of the people who do smoke on the train have zero interest in paying higher. And so they will simply keep doing what they've been doing.
Again, enforcement is always the question with something like this. Another suggestion they had was selling naming rights to the city. So could we become Wintrust, Illinois?
Absolutely foolish.
Yeah, I don't even like naming rights when it comes to buildings. I think, and actually here's the reason it bothers me, weirdly. My issue is that I never think of it, right? And I suppose this is the point, is I don't think of it as naming rights. To me, it just feels like another office for whatever that company is. So guaranteed rate. I'm like, oh, that's the guaranteed rate off. I don't know do they have another building in Chicago? I don't know. Like, and that bothers me because it's not their office, it's a stadium. So maybe that's just like my literal thinking that's that's bugging me.
And some are just better than others. United
Yes,
Center is just sounds better than
it
Guaranteed
does.
Rate, right? The
It
name
does.
just flows, right? It has context outside of the corporation. Of course, Sears Tower, for example, is, to your point, well, they at that point when they named it, they did have office space in there. So,
I think it's okay. I think if you actually have office space for the business that the naming rights come from in the thing, I think that's fair game. Else it mostly bothers me.
another one, distracted driver cameras. We have cameras to catch speeders and red light runners. Why not for drivers who check their phones at $100 a pop?
I know you hate this one.
We'd have to nab only 12 million to erase the deficit. Yeah. This is one of the things I sort of, it's probably the worst part of my Chicago citizenship is that
You're a bad driver.
I openly admit that I am, right. I'm a bad driver for everybody else. I'm a great driver for myself. I'll be out here moving through this thing, typically looking just for some GPS action. But that's about it. But yeah, more cameras.
That's my thing. My thing is always more the like, I don't really want more camera surveillance in the city. Like, that's not really what I want.
The efficacy of the reports aside, the surveillance state is it not enough? Is it not enough? Like, if cars can't.
Well, and theoretically for like a distracted driver one, you need to look into the car and see their face. You know what I mean? Like, that's a lot.
Yeah. And then the other two, I'm gonna be honest. The first, the sell neighborhoods to suburbs. Well, suburbs ain't got no money. What are you talking about? Siphon off Lake Michigan. Well, that no one likes that.
And also, we're already doing it.
We're already
we have
doing
a
that.
deal with Joliet
already happening
to give them a bunch of Lake Michigan water. There's already a pipeline it's happening, friends. I mean, we're not building a pipeline as Chicago Magazine suggests.
To the south and southwest.
Yeah, to California, or Arizona, or whatever.
But again, right? They was being funny.
We are selling it to Joliet, though. Yeah. That is happening.
They was trying to be funny, but I will say, of course, I don't have a whole task force or about 6 or 7 task force next to me trying to help me do this and weeks to come up with it. But I will say this was kind of a challenge. Like
this was hard.
But I do think we had at least one or two that kind of made sense. And so, Simone, this first one was yours.
At least entertaining, right? So here's my thought, is I was thinking about like, what's something that Chicagoans hate? And we can tax it when it happens. And I was like, what if we make sports teams pay a tax when they lose? And perhaps you could structure it such that, if you are in a long playoff drought, right, you pay more, or even just paying back whatever subsidies you're getting on your stadium, right? Basically, right, the whole point of our sports, we want our sports teams to win. We want them to do well. That's what's good for the city.
It should cost you to lose.
It should cost you to lose.
Especially if you're a franchise that is openly not investing in your team so that you can siphon off as much money as possible. White Sox, Bulls owner, we see you. We see the play. We don't like it.
I do feel like there was a downstate lawmaker who maybe suggested something like this at some point. I actually don't think this is an original idea, but I think again I also think that was a tongue-in-cheek kind of proposal. But it just seems to me like we're having all this talk about the Bears moving to Arlington Heights and kind of what kind of tax breaks they're going to get for the stadium there. We're talking about the Fire Stadium. We're talking about the White Sox Stadium already, which just feels like the guaranteed rate's not that old. I know it is, but it feels like it's not. And so it just seems like we could, maybe get a little more out of this. So that's my big idea for revenue raising in Chicago, that I'm sure the sports teams, they're not going to threaten to move out if such a thing were to occur. I'm sure they would be happy to contribute to the civic life monetarily.
So every time you lose, you should have to pay some money to us because we didn't pay hella money to you.
Exactly. It's compensation for everybody who bought tickets to that game and had to watch their team lose. Jacoby, what was your idea?
All right, so the more I sat with it, the more I didn't like it.
No, I had a feeling you might, but yeah.
But when I first said it, I was like, oh, just a blanket West Loop cover charge. Then I kind of expanded it to other sort of nightlife districts around the city, sort of a River North, a sort of Wrigleyville, even like a parts a little South Loop, right? Just like a nightlife cover charge. And this is the idea that if you are coming into this business corridor to eat, drink, social club, shop, whatever the case is, just like a little flat tax. Just you come into the area, you got to pay a little bit of extra just to play in this area. Again, how would you actually enforce that? Because my first thought was like a toll.
Well, because my initial thought when you pitched this is I thought it was sort of a version of congestion pricing, right? Which is a thing that, Chicago has congestion pricing for Uber specifically, but there's this concept of congestion pricing, which is essentially that. It's a toll to get in the city, but specifically levied on drivers in an attempt to prevent people from driving into downtown. And so I could kind of see that aspect almost working for a spot like West Loop, because I think many of us have been in that situation where you are trying to get an Uber out of West Loop, and boy, you are, I don't know what you better take the train, because that is
just introduce a new city tax, a little 1.5%, just a little nightlife tax. We already got candy tax and pop tax, and I know we have an amusement tax already.
The other problem with the West Loop one that we kind of discovered is, like, as annoying as it is for those of us who've had this experience of like being out in West Loop and it's crazy busy and like it's super crowded and you can't get into the spot you want to get into. The reason it's like that is because a lot of the spots are really good. Like the restaurants we've all had the experience of like, oh, do I really want to try this West Loop restaurant? And you go and then it's excellent. And you're just like, well, okay. Like,
I guess I got to deal with this. So yeah, those were, and again, let's be clear, these were ideas that we came up with between seeing this article and 45 minutes later hopping on to record this. So I think if we gave ourselves some time, we could probably come up with some better ones. And since you listening to this and you maybe have a little more time, send us your ideas. 773-780-0246. What's some creative ways you would raise money for the city, right? I know somebody's going to hear that and be like, y'all didn't suggest cutting the police budget. Yes, we did yesterday. Yes, we did.
Yeah, we listened to that yesterday. We did that yesterday.
Yes, we did.
In depth, I would say.
This episode is brought to you by Mubi, a global streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema. On Mubi, stream beautiful hand-picked films anytime, anywhere. Right now, you can stream Lurker, a sharp psychological thriller and the directorial debut of the Bear and Beef writer-producer Alex Russell. It follows a 20-something retail clerk who crosses paths with a rising pop star and slowly worms his way into their world, stan culture gone mad as the line between friend and fan blurs. Access and proximity turn into a matter of life and death. Y'all, I saw it at the Music Box about a month and a half ago. I ain't gonna lie, kind of creepy, real suspenseful. You're always kind of on the edge of your seat wondering what's gonna happen. You can watch Lurker and so much more exclusively on Mubi, and the best part, you could try it free for 30 days. Just head to mubi.com/citycast25. That's Mubi, mubi.com/citycast25. Hey, last time we asked readers and listeners to hear our suggestions and to critique them was when we talked about spookiest things in Chicago. And Simone, they had thoughts. Their final looked completely different for ours. Like ours ended up being the most basic, boring version that you could come up with, which was sort of, and it honestly ended up being kind of more real than we hoped. We was trying to like be a little meta, a little fun with it. And then we ended up with the Lake versus the Congress Hotel, which is essentially a hotel that had all of these sightings of ghosts and creepy murders and suicides that took place. A very depressing set of stories versus the Lake, which ultimately what we sort of leaned into its scariness is the fact that it could just sort of swallow you whole, which again, both of those kind of really terrifying in their own right. But our listeners didn't agree that on its face that those were the scariest things or spookiest things in the city.
Absolutely not. They have voted completely opposite the way you, me, and Michelle kind of got to. So as a reminder, what the base bracket was, our contenders were the Congress Plaza Hotel versus the Chicago horror film canon, so your Candyman, your Child's Play, etc. And then we had bombing on stage, the idea of getting up on stage and bombing, and Chicago's wild animals or some kind of animal attack. We had multi-way intersections, so your various six corners, various big intersections versus Lake Michigan, and lower whacker, specifically lower whacker, and our deteriorating underpasses. And yeah, like I said, from round one, they voted opposite of us completely. So in the first round, we then got to Chicago horror films versus bombing on stage. I am shocked Congress Plaza Hotel did not make it out of the first round.
Honestly, to that point, I think more people just probably come in contact with a horror movie and are like, well, I've been scared by a horror movie. Congress, I didn't even know that was a thing. And we were very much like, we know the history. So he's like, well, this inspired most of this stuff. So of course we got to go with the sort of the real thing. But I understand how people were like, obviously scary movies versus some random red signed hotel that you see from Columbus.
And then bombing on stage went out over the animal attacks, which I kind of understand too, actually.
I understand. I understand that.
Especially because I think a lot of people were probably reading this and maybe didn't listen to our kind of dissection of it. Because I think I do think it's like kind of the animal one is kind of random and you kind of have to like.
For sure.
There's a few steps before it actually gets scary.
I was very arrogant about it, but like the anxiety of bombing on stage I think about it all the time, actually. All the time. It's very scary.
And then multi-way intersections went out over Lake Michigan, which I could see. That one I probably could have seen either way on. I think a lot of people probably don't see Lake Michigan as scary.
I think I voted intersections initially.
I think a lot of people probably don't see Lake Michigan as scary at all. And then lower whacker versus deteriorating underpasses. Again, that was another one I kind of felt like could go either way.
Yeah.
They're sort of 6-1. And then, but the results of this round are kind of wild to me. So then bombing on stage won out over Chicago horror films. I just didn't think that this many people would be afraid of bombing.
Real fear versus artificial fear. Though.
I guess, yeah. It's so funny. Public speaking is not among my... I have a lot of anxieties and it's not on my top. I wouldn't even call it top 10, but I do this for a living, so maybe that's what it is. I guess I wouldn't have conceived that this many people would be like, no, this is the spookiest thing, the scariest thing. And then lower whacker went out just barely over multi-way intersections, which not super. I do think lower whacker is among the on the spookier side of things, like truly kind of creepy. Although it was funny, I was in an Uber over the weekend and we were talking about this and the driver was like, lower whacker isn't scary if you know it. And I was like, yeah, but the problem is most people don't know it. Like the problem is if you don't know it, like,
you know, the corner, like the dead ends, like it's like, come on, y'all, stop.
It's underground.
Like the dinginess
it is underground.
It's underground. Like, stop.
It is underground.
It's aesthetically one of the spookier things in the city, bar none.
I'll be curious to see which one of these wins, because I do think it is sort of a, as you point out, I do think it's kind of a like a true real life fear versus something that is genuinely spooky. You can vote in the final round now.
I want to give a huge thank you to our executive producer, Simone Alisea. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Jacoby.
If you are new to CityCast Chicago, thank you for making it to this point in the episode, even if you was listening on 2x speed. But I want to let you know, we also have a website, chicago.citycast.fm. We update it with articles almost every single day. Some of our old podcast episodes are there. You can check out our events calendar. Also, if you really, really, really love what you heard today, and this was just like your first go at it or like your second because you listened yesterday, and you're like, man, I kind of want to get these people money. I want to make sure they could be around for, for episodes and episodes to come. You can also do that from our website. You can sign up to become a CityCast Chicago neighbor. We're going to give you some ad-free listening. We're going to make sure every single week you get some of our favorite events happening in and around the city directly in your inbox. And like I said up top, you're going to continue to make sure that your new favorite podcast can keep going. Some good news. This Saturday, join the National Museum of Mexican Art for their Dia de los Muertos celebration. Experience the beauty of this beloved tradition through ofrendas created by community members, live music and performances, art activities, and a stunning illuminated ofrenda projected onto the exterior of the museum. I will drop a link in the show notes for you. As always, we appreciate you for making time for our little corner of Chicago. We'll talk to you then. Peace.